I wanted to do a little bit of work to the Allis Chalmers D17 here. It has a major oil leak on the valve cover. That is one thing that is leaking a lot, and it is also leaking at the rear main seal for the engine in between the clutch, the flywheel, and the engine itself, and the clutch. It's leaking all in there. So it still drives fine. The oil just drips out. You guys probably can't see the oil mark on the concrete. I'm not going to fix that today, but I do want to try fixing this valve cover gasket. This tractor, in about 8 hours worth of use, maybe 10, probably 10 hours worth of use, I will have to add at least a quart of oil to the engine. So this thing has some serious oil leaks, and I just want to address this before we run the motor out of oil or whatever the case may be. So let's get started. I'll bring you guys in, and you guys can see what I'm talking about here. That is the oil spill out of the rear main seal. So for that, what I'll use to fix that is I'll change the oil in it, and then I will put in some AT205 reseal, and that will hopefully seal up the rear main seal in this thing. And see how you guys can, this looks kind of shiny and wet in there, and over here you can't see it as good, but this is kind of wet too. It's not bad, actually. Right in here it is, and that's definitely coming from the valve cover gasket. So let's start tearing this thing apart. I'll pull both sides off, pull the valve cover off, clean it, take a look inside, have a look at the valves. I'm not going to adjust them or anything. I just want to seal things up for now. It runs fine, and I'm kind of the school of thought, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But with the valve cover gasket leaking like it is, I'd like to do something with this. It leaks quite a bit of oil. So let's get started tearing this thing down. Another thing I could do to try to dry up this tractor when it comes to the oil leaks, the rear seals and the transmission and everything are fine. The PTO shaft seal leaks a little bit, really not bad at all. It's just, I don't even think there's a puddle on the floor. It's really not that bad anyways. But for the rear main seal of this engine, I also bought it's actually rear main seal stop leak. It's like, is it bars stop leak or a rear main seal stop leak, something like that. I bought some of that, and I might put that into the engine because when you are running this, you can actually put your hand in where the clutch is. On this tractor, there's a hole that I think they put in there special in the event that this tractor has a rear main seal leak, that you can at least still drive it around. Allis Chalmers was thinking ahead. And actually, one reason I think the rear main seal of this tractor is leaking, it's probably because of wear. However, I wonder if the clutch was stuck in this tractor and someone used brake clean or something to try and free up the clutch, and maybe that messed up the rear main seal of this tractor. I'm not really sure, but if you leave this tractor sit in one spot running with the front of the engine tilted higher up than the back, you'll have an oil puddle probably about 6 inches wide. So I really want to try to dry up this tractor the best that I can, but we'll see. And as you can see, I forgot to move the camera there, but that oil spill is it's kind of bothering me. It's really, it's money down the drain. It's being wasteful. It's just, I just like to try and just dry this tractor up. So here I am cleaning up the gasket. And I'll tell you, Allis Chalmers, man, even this gasket that is on here, it's probably 3/16 of an inch thick. Even the gasket is quality on this tractor. So I know I'm probably making a lot of people worry there cleaning this thing up with a wire wheel, but I didn't really know what else to use to clean this gasket. I just didn't really know, and I figured I'd use something that would get off all the grease and grime. Someone had tightened a bunch of dirt in between the gasket and the mating surfaces on this tractor, and that's why it was leaking so much. So I'm just kind of looking things over here, and I've got to say, we get further into this engine, and we all I wanted to do was just try and just dry up this motor. However, we end up noticing that this tractor had two pretty badly bent push rods to run the valves, and this motor always had a slight miss to it. So I'm guessing that maybe that is the reason why the miss was happening in this engine. I'm not really sure. I'm not an expert at this kind of stuff, but yeah, these old tractors are really quite simple to work on. You have to know what you're doing when you're doing valves and stuff, but really they're pretty simple. There's really no electronics and stuff. But here I've got my brother here. He's kind of done more work with internally in these engines than I have. He had the 8N all the valves out of it and lapped them and cleaned the whole inside of the engine. Literally the head was off, the head gasket off, and everything. So he's been inside of these engines more than I have. So I figured I would ask him if he is able to do this, and fortunately he was. So I wanted to thank my brother for doing this. I could not have done this without his expertise. And I've got to say, the engine on this tractor, I guess Allis Chalmers has like 3 or 4 compression rings on each cylinder of this tractor, and generally speaking, the rings are what wear out first on an engine. And Allis Chalmers having 4 of them means it'll keep compression a lot longer than some of the tractors that have just 1 or 2. I think usually engines have 2, but I think Allis Chalmers put 3 or 4 on here. So what I'm trying to get at here is that this tractor was pretty well made. You know, the power shift, I can shift on the fly in this thing, which is really nice. I have a sort of a semi-live PTO in this tractor, and it also has power steering, so it's really a pretty serious tractor, being that it has 63 horsepower at the motor and probably, I think it was like 50 or 52 at the PTO. So this is a pretty serious tractor to have, and I want to try to take care of it. Take care of it as much as I can. I think in a previous video I changed the transmission fluid in this thing and put in gear oil. The old transmission fluid that was in it looked pretty milky in color, so I ended up just draining all of that was in there. And this tractor takes, I think it's around 8 gallons of gear oil in the rear end and transmission, so that's an awful lot of fluid to put into this thing and to take out. You know, you need 2 5-gallon buckets to change the oil in the rear end of this thing. So, but anyways, getting back to the engine, my brother is getting ready to take off I guess that is the rocker shaft, is what they call that. And he's kind of examining the push rods, and each push rod in this engine, I'm assuming, from what I can tell, I mean, we've ran this thing since then, since doing this, and it seems to run fine, other than the valves are a little bit noisy. However, I want to, you have to adjust the valves in this thing when it's hot. You can't really adjust them when it's cold, so we ended up just adjusting them when it's cold, and when we get the motor up to operating temperature, we will, at a later point, adjust them when they are hot. But the push rods, there was a guy on eBay selling these push rods that go into the engine here to run the valves, or to go over to the rocker shaft from the cam, I guess, to run the valves. And each push rod was $25. So fortunately, I only needed two of them. There were only 2 out of 8 that were bent, so I guess that's not that bad, but still, it was over $50 to have the push rods in this thing, shipped to me and everything. So that's just the way it is, I guess. But you're buying a pretty good quality, and the new push rods were actually thicker than the old ones because I think Allis Chalmers realized that this was a weak point in these engines, so they kind of beefed them up and made them better. So my brother decided while we were in here, which was a very good idea, that we should torque down the head bolts on this engine, because who knows when the last time they were done. And in case anyone's wondering, this is a 1959 Allis Chalmers D17 tractor. It is, I think it weighs 4,500 pounds, and then I have roughly 1,000 pounds of ballast in the back of the tractor here. So 5,500 pound tractor, which pretty much weighs as much as, as probably as much as an F-150. It's a pickup truck or something. So this is a rather serious machine. So we are just kind of tightening everything down. You are supposed to back off the valves in this tractor to put the rocker shaft on, and that's what my brother did. So again, I want to thank him for doing this. I really appreciate it. Having a tractor down is not something I want to have. My brother and I have the engine pretty much all back together. Valve cover gasket and everything's in there. We adjusted the valves cold. You are supposed to adjust them hot. But the new push rods are in, and we're going to fire this tractor up and hope for the best. Hopefully nothing breaks or bends like it did. Oh, and just because I can, look at these push rods. Look how crooked this is. That is supposed to be straight. Look at that. Pretty bad. And this one is bent also. Not as bad, but these are... this is really, really bad. So let's see if this thing will fire up. So this is a cold start. On,